Hi there. I'm Dr. Suzanne Bechtel, a passionate legal educator dedicated to making legal studies clear, practical, and even a little inspiring. On this channel, you'll find a growing collection of videos designed to help you prepare for the Certified Paralegal exam. It covers key topics, breaking down complex concepts, and offering study tips that actually stick. If you're looking for a deeper dive, check out my Teachable School, where I offer structured courses, interactive tools, and exclusive resources to support your journey towards certification. Watch this video to the end and you'll find a coupon code for a discount. Don't forget to subscribe and explore the playlists. Your success on the NALA-CP exam starts here. Now, before we move on to the lecture, there are two important disclaimers. First of all, this is not considered legal advice. Everything shared here is designed to support your learning journey. Also, I am not a lawyer. This course is designed to help you understand the concepts of the exam. Thank you. Hello, this is Dr. Suzanne Bechtel. I am now giving a talk on the second of 3-part series about contracts, specifically offer and acceptance. This particular lecture will go into the key principles of acceptance. We'll look at the fundamentals of acceptance, talk about some clarifications and exceptions that are apparent from the mirror image rule, and look to the UCC matters that are involved in this, and talk about who can accept an offer. In the third lecture, and we'll go into option contracts. Then in the third lecture, we'll go into acceptance on bilateral and unilateral contracts and termination and revocation, and how those are how revocation affects bilateral and unilateral contracts. So the fundamentals of acceptance in contract formation. We continue next with our acceptance in forming contracts, and we've already talked about the offer. The next step in forming a contract would be acceptance, where the offeree must give the appropriate assent, and they must essentially agree or say, yes, I'll enter into this contract with you. One of the most important roles with respect to acceptance is something called the mirror image rule, and it's going to come up a lot in this lecture. I keep having to insert mirror image rule discussion on more than one slide. I tried not to be repetitive, but found it impossible not to. The mirror image rule is a common law rule. It's not from the UCC, but the UCC does apply and mirror image aspect to it. The UCC sets out that the acceptance must match the offer, which is what the mirror image rule is illustrating through common law. It must be identical. You can't change the terms. So the offer, if the offer is to sell you a car for $10,000 to be delivered on Friday and the money to be paid on Friday, and it's this particular car, if you were the offeree in that position and you said, well, I'll buy it from you for $5,000, you changed the term, and that doesn't count as acceptance. It really is what we would call a counteroffer. And under the UCC, minor changes can still be accepted unless it's material, or if you add as-is terms to the offer. So as is, when you go to the car lot, used car lot, you'll always see a sign on the car that says as is. And we'll discuss these points on the next slide a little bit more deeply. The methods of acceptance and the role of silence is what I'll cover next. And they must essentially agree, the parties must essentially agree, the person, the offeree, must essentially agree or say, yes, I'll enter in this contract with you.
And the offeree can do that in different ways. They could say it, they could make a gesture, maybe nodding, nodding their head up and down or something like that, or take action. It could be maybe actually doing the requested act or something like that, but they have to do something. Silence does not count as acceptance, so just being silent on someone makes an offer on someone who makes an offer to you to enter into a contract will not count. Acceptance is important because this is what actually creates the contract. You got the offer hanging out there, and it's up to the offeree to catch it and accept it and say, yes, I accept. And at that moment, it establishes the contract. It establishes the parties' rights and responsibilities under the contract. So acceptance is where the offeree must give the appropriate assent. They must essentially agree or say yes. And it's one of the most important rules with respect to acceptance is something called the mirror image rule. And what this means essentially, and by the way, this is a common law rule, not the UCC, but it says your acceptance must match the offer. It must be identical. You cannot change the terms. So if the offer is to sell you a car for $10,000, delivered on Friday, money you paid on Friday, and it's this particular car. You were the offeree in that position. You said, well, I guess I'll buy it for you from $5,000. As I pointed out earlier, that's a counteroffer, not an acceptance. That kind of situation, certainly in buying a car, is not uncommon. But it's important for us to know that to be a true acceptance, to form a contract, it has to match what this mirror image rule asserts. It's why its name is mirror image rule. And it's because if you hold a piece of paper and you'd written on it the offer, the terms of the offer, for example, a Toyota Camry, $10,000, et cetera, et cetera. If the offer typed up, if their typed up acceptance is exactly the same and holding it to the mirror, it would be like holding them up to the mirror and they would match perfectly. There'd be no difference. So that's why we use the term mirror image rule. It's not a change. However, keep in mind, you're not changing terms if you simply ask if something else is possible. And keep in mind, if we're talking about a contract governed by the UCC, remember that means a contract for the sale of goods between merchants. It's governed by this. You actually can change some terms and still have it function as an acceptance as long as it's not a material change. And they define material change in the UCC. So you can make some little changes basically under the UCC and it's not going to kill the offer. It would still function as an acceptance. Under the UCC with these minor changes, we'll go into that a little bit more focused. So if we're talking about a contract governed by the UCC, remember that it's a contract for the sale of goods between merchants, and so the contract would be governed by the UCC. You can can change some terms and still have it function as an acceptance as long as it's not a material change. And so any change would count as an acceptance under the UCC because this is a specificity as is or ironclad offer to contract. So we'll go into that in the next slide. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit ahead of myself. All right, so an ironclad or as-is contract, that allows minor term changes unless the offer is explicitly as-is or ironclad. Those can't be subject to any changes. Any change wouldn't count as an acceptance under the UCC because it's specified as is or ironclad. So they essentially give the offeree a chance to get out of this and not form a contract if they don't like the changes. So you're not stuck with it if they make little changes. It won't happen. It's ironclad or as is. If the offer for the contract is made specifically as is, I'll sell this car as is or house as is, the offeror is essentially saying, take it or leave it. Here's what it is. So we look next to who can accept an offer, because each scenario can look a little differently as far as the offeror is established, but who can accept the offer under the different scenarios I'm going to provide. So there are acceptance principles for a specific person acceptance, where only the individual named in the offer can accept the contract, making acceptance exclusive to one person. On a group acceptance scenario, offers made to groups can be accepted by any member, such as in a reward, poster hanging with a reward to find my dog, or public ads. So who is able to give acceptance to a contract is important. It's going to be a person specific, and so it will be outlined in the offer. If it says only Mr. Smith, that's been made to a specific person being able to accept. Sometimes you have an offer, however, that's made to a group of people. Maybe it's an offer made to a group that's standing there in front of you. So any one of you, if anyone wants to buy my camera, I'm selling it for $100, and you give me, and I give you terms, and anyone there can accept. That could be the case. So for a reward poster or an ad for something in the want ads, anyone can read that and accept it, and it would essentially be the first one to do that, to accept it. Another specific type of contract is the option contract, and I will go into that next. No, two more slides. Public offers, I just mentioned, that's where any person can accept the offer, and the first come, first serve. Option contracts. Option contracts, they hold an offer open for a specific time if the offeree provides consideration, which is usually money. This is classic real estate transaction, classic car purchase transaction. Maybe some money put down on the car they're thinking about buying, but want to make sure they do a little more shopping around. So they have an option contract with the dealer for a specific period of time, and the $100 or whatever is provided to the dealership is what creates that specific option with a specific period of time. So during that time frame, they can't offer the car to anyone else, and that's important to note. And they can't offer it to someone else. It's just, you have to know that. Time frame's important. You have a limited duration as the offeree to take on that contract to purchase it instead of holding it. Okay, so I'm kind of going to do a little bit of review on bilateral and unilateral contracts. It just makes sense to keep the context of this particular topic of offer and acceptance in play. So I apologize if I have a little bit of redundancy in the previous lectures or going forward. So a quick review: formation of unilateral contracts. The contract is formed when the offeree performs the requested act. That completes the contract. It's an interesting anomaly about unilateral contracts. And unilateral contracts are frequently fall into the common situation of reward situation. There's a motivation to perform and claim the reward for something, the poster hanging, find my cat, and I'll pay you cash. But with bilateral contracts, the acceptance methods work like this. How we accept it is, in bilateral contract, acceptance involves an exchange of promises or performing the promised act. And in bilateral contracts, there's a mutual exchange of promises, and each party commits to perform their part. And the acceptance in bilateral contracts is that through a promise or by performing the promised act immediately. The mailbox rule comes into play here because acceptance the mailbox rule requires that, or the mailbox rule states that acceptance is effective. The effective date of the acceptance is important, and the mailbox rule provides that it's effective. The acceptance is effective once the acceptance is properly dispatched by mail. Rejection, on the other hand, of the offer is effective only when it's actually received by the offerer. So they actually have to have it in hand, as opposed to the mailbox rule explanation. Another review is bilateral contracts, and to add the importance of a clear assent being required. So as already discussed in this lecture series, a bilateral contract involves mutual promises exchanged between two parties. Those are the promises that bind. Each party is obligated to perform what they promised. Each party is both a promisor and a promisee. And there is a requirement of clear assent. And the offeree must clearly agree to the offer to form a valid contract. Communication is required, so there is no acceptance unless it's communicated to the offeror. And in unilateral contracts, we know from past conversations and lectures that acceptance occurs only through performing the requested act and not by communication. Mailbox rule comes in again for a quick review, but to focus it in context. The dispatched acceptance rule means that acceptance is effective once properly dispatched, such as when mailed or faxed, even if it's not received. And if we want to explain that further, acceptance is effective when the offeree properly dispatches it, such as placing a letter in the mailbox. Unilateral contract acceptance, again, acceptance in these is only by performance, and rejection of an offer is effective only when it's actually received by the offeror, and rejection of an offer is effective only when it's actually, So rejection is effective upon receipt, only when it's actually received by the offeror. So I apologize for that repetitive. Termination and revocation of offers is also an important topic in contracts. When there are time limits, when there's a termination due to time limits, and how revocation applies to this, when there are time limits on offers with limited time frame expires, can't be accepted once the period ends. Before acceptance, the offeror can revoke the offer, and if there has been a detrimental reliance of a party, then the courts can uphold the contract if the offeree relied on the offer to their own detriment. And the completion of a unilateral contract, the completion finalizes a contract. As I pointed out, that's just one of those interesting anomalies about unilateral contracts. But that is only up until the offeree begins performance. So, back again to a situation. Here's an example would be, if it's a unilateral contract that says I'll pay you $100 to babysit my kids on Saturday night, then the acceptance takes the form of babysitting the kids that night. And that's what makes the contract. So you have to actually perform the act requested to accept it. You can't just make a promise because a unilateral contract isn't set up that way. It's a promise for an act. Some things can terminate the ability of the offering to accept, and certainly not, if the offer has a limited time frame, a limited time offer, once that time's expired, they're not able to accept it. Sometimes, however, after the parties revoke their offer, or maybe the offer is rejected, and then that ends it right there. It dies right there. And sometimes it's a matter of law that does something that limits the time. And so we'll move on to that topic. So what is the essence of rejection? Let's look at, kind of get a context going there. Rejection of contracts always turns on how acceptance works. So I want to make that an overarching point. In unilateral contracts, completion, again, finalizes the contract. The offer in unilateral contracts, the offer is rejected when the offeree clearly communicates refusal, the offeree takes action inconsistent with acceptance, or the offeree simply does not perform. In bilateral contracts, rejection before acceptance, offers in bilateral contracts can be rejected any time before acceptance and is communicated through the express declination, counteroffer, silence, or taking action inconsistent with acceptance. And again, the detrimental reliance exception in law applies. The courts may enforce contracts if the offeree relied on the offer to their detriment. All right. In option contracts, we have some legal exceptions. If you have to something else of detrimental reliance could come about when there's an offering relied on the offer and taken some sort of steps, maybe spent money, devoted time, something because they intended on accepting it and thought they were in a contract, even though necessarily they might not have been. And so, the court may find that there's a contract there. But offers can be revoked any time before acceptance unless it's protected by exceptions like an option contract or detrimental reliance, and the option contract being like the car situation that I discussed earlier. So in conclusion, as we navigate contract acceptance, we need to grasp the contract acceptance principles. It's essential for valid and enforceable agreements. There's some standard rules and exceptions in acceptance safeguards that help to safeguard the parties' legal rights. And understanding these nuances in acceptance helps us confirm contracts are valid and binding. So thank you.
I hope you got some good information from this video lecture. Don't forget that I have a Teachable school account. Here is the address for that, mayananda-s-school.teachable.com. The name of my school is Mayananda. And also there's a coupon here for you to save some money. And finally, good luck on the exam. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.